10 years. A decade of youth, blood, tears, and sleepless nights. I poured every ounce of my strength into transforming Sterling Enterprises, my father's outdated tech company, from a failing business into a $250 million empire. And yet, at this very moment, in the celebration meant to honor my success, my father beamed, raised his wineglass, and spoke in a tone both proud and final. "You've done well, Rose, but now, it's Jason's turn to take over the company." The words cut through me like a sharp blade. The room suddenly felt cold, the cheerful chatter around me fading into a distant murmur. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wineglass, but I kept my smile intact. More than 10 years in the corporate world had taught me one crucial lesson: never let them see you break. The party was held in our family estate, a lavish, opulent space filled with congratulations and clinking glasses under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Family friends, business partners, and the board of directors were all in attendance. This should have been my night, the moment when all my hard work was recognized. Instead, it became a stage where my father handed over my achievements to an undeserving successor. Jason, my younger brother, sat across the table, pretending to bow his head humbly, but I caught the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He had never put in the effort to understand the business, yet here he was, sitting comfortably, reaping the rewards. I swallowed the rising lump of pain in my throat and let out a soft chuckle. "Really, father?" I asked, my voice light as a breeze, but sharp with meaning. He nodded, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Yes, Rose. You've done an incredible job. But a family company must be passed down to the son. You understand, don't you?" Understand? I had spent my entire life proving that I didn't need to be a son to lead Sterling Enterprises. I had closed multi-million-dollar deals, secured a place for the company in the top 50 fastest-growing tech firms in the US, and built a loyal, powerhouse team. But none of it was enough. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't let them see me fall. Lifting my wineglass, I tilted my head slightly toward Jason and smirked. "Well then, congratulations, Jason. I wish you luck." I didn't say success because I knew he would fail. Around us, glasses were raised, toasts were made, and smiles were exchanged. My mother sat quietly at the corner of the table, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Perhaps regret, though, as always, she said nothing. She had never challenged my father's decisions. I didn't eat another bite. I simply sat there, letting the empty words of praise wash over me like meaningless noise. As the party drew to a close, I stood, smoothing down my black velvet dress. Before leaving the table, I cast one last look at my father and Jason. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just smiled. They thought they had removed me. What my father and Jason didn't know was that I hadn't just built a company. I had built an empire within it. And by tomorrow morning, they would realize who truly held the power. As a child, I grew up in rushed dinners, tense board meetings, and nights when my father came home late, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. Back then, Sterling Enterprises was just a small tech firm, barely surviving on a handful of contracts. I lost count of the times I overheard my mother whisper to him in the kitchen about overdue loans, or how many times he had to mortgage assets just to keep the company afloat. I saw everything. But what my father never saw, or refused to see, was that I had dreams of my own. From a young age I was captivated by spreadsheets, strategy meetings, and the open laptop my father left on the dining table. By the time I was 12, I had already begun researching the tech market, predicting the next big trends. But I was never the one he placed his hopes on. Jason was. I still remember the day I graduated from business school, top of my class, with a thesis on market expansion strategies for mid-sized companies. Heart pounding, I stepped into my father's office, eager and breathless. "Dad, I want to work for the company." He looked up from his screen, frowning. "Rose, you just graduated. Find another company where you can gain experience first before thinking about working here." I had anticipated that answer. I've learned enough. I know the company's problems. If things don't change, Sterling Enterprises won't survive another 5 years. My father smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile filled with doubt. You're only 22, do you really think you can run a company? I clenched my fists. Not run it, but I can help. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Rose, this company isn't meant for you. One day Jason will take over. If you really want to work here, you should accept a more suitable position. A more suitable position? I frowned. Assistant director. Or human resources. I scoffed. He had decided my fate long before I ever had the chance to prove myself. But I didn't give up. I started working at the company with a meaningless title. No authority, no real acknowledgement. But I watched, I learned, and I waited. I studied every number, every contract, every mistake the company had made. I found gaps my father never saw, or refused to see. And when the company faced a financial crisis in 2014, I had the answer. I saved the company. I was the one who proposed the digital transformation strategy, turning Sterling Enterprises from an outdated software firm into a cloud data service provider. I was the one who negotiated with partners, securing the company's first $10 million contract. Enough to pull it back from the brink of bankruptcy. I was the one who changed everything. But when my father spoke about the company's miraculous recovery, he never once mentioned me. And Jason? Throughout that entire period, he never set foot in the company. He was too busy chasing one ridiculous business venture after another. First a custom shoe startup, then a pointless dating app. Over and over he failed. But every time he failed, my father was always ready to fund his next attempt. And me? I never received a single cent from him. But I didn't need it. I kept working, I kept pushing the company forward. I started buying up shares, little by little, every time my father needed to raise capital. He didn't care, as long as the company kept growing, he was willing to sign any contract I put in front of him. I never asked for recognition. I only wanted to prove that I could do it. Yet even after I transformed Sterling Enterprises from a dying business into a $250 million empire, my father still didn't trust me. That night, when he announced that Jason would take over the company, I realized something. I could work harder than anyone. I could dedicate my entire life to this company. But to my father, I would never be enough. I looked at Jason, a man who had done nothing to deserve the position he was handed. I looked at my father, a man who had always seen me as nothing more than a temporary tool. I understood now. They didn't see me as the heir. But they didn't know that I hadn't just built a company. I had built a foundation of power in my hands. And they wouldn't push me aside so easily. Tomorrow morning, they would realize I was the one in control. I didn't leave the party right away. I kept my smile, raised my glass, and toasted to Jason, as if I had fully accepted my father's decision. The voices around me cheered, offering their congratulations. But I didn't hear a thing. Because in my mind, the battle had already begun. After leaving the estate, I drove straight home. But I didn't rest. I sat at my desk in my home office, opened my laptop, and started reviewing everything. They thought they could cast me aside so easily? I spent 10 years building this company. I was never naive enough to believe that my efforts would be recognized just because I worked hard. I knew the rules of the game. And I knew they had made a grave mistake by underestimating me. I opened the list of shareholders and investment agreements from the past years. Over time, I had acquired shares from long-standing executives, early investors, and even from my father himself, whenever the company needed to raise capital. He never noticed. He was too confident that he would always be the one in control. But I was different. I never allowed myself to be put in a position of weakness. I scanned through the documents. Numbers flickered across the screen, and as I compiled them, one truth became as clear as daylight. I owned 60% of the company. I couldn't believe my eyes. I checked again. and again. But the truth remained unchanged. Sterling Enterprises was no longer my father's company. It belonged to me. I opened a file titled, Board of Directors Governance Terms. It was the most important document, signed when the company underwent restructuring 5 years ago. And in it, there was a clear clause. Any change in the CEO position must be approved by the controlling shareholder. And that person was me. I laughed. Did they really think they could get rid of me with a mere announcement? Jason would never sit in the CEO's chair. My father wouldn't be able to stop me. I had the power, the legal authority, and most importantly, I had a plan. Did they think I would walk into the office tomorrow morning, quietly accept defeat, and step aside? No. I would make them understand that I was never someone who could be cast aside so easily. I sent a series of emails to the company's legal department, requesting a full review of ownership rights and governance terms. I contacted the bank, ensuring that no financial transactions could be made without my approval. I even sent an email to the board of directors, calling for an emergency meeting first thing tomorrow. My father and Jason thought I would obediently walk away. But when they arrived at the office in the morning, they would see that I wasn't going anywhere. I glanced out the window. The city still slept under the dim glow of streetlights. But I wasn't sleeping. I had been preparing for this moment for years. I had done everything to prove my worth. But my father never saw it. He never intended for me to inherit this company. Fine. Then I would take what should have been mine. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. The battle had begun, and I had no intention of losing. 8:45 a.m. I walked into Sterling Enterprises just like any other day, but today, there was something different in the air. I felt the furtive glances as I passed through the lobby. A few employees whispered among themselves, only to quickly turn away when I met their eyes. Word of my father's decision from last night had surely spread. They thought I had lost. They thought I would quietly step aside. I kept my back straight, each step sharp and deliberate against the marble floor. The sound of my heels echoed with unwavering confidence. Today was not the day I left. Today was the day I took control. 9:00 a.m. A sharp knock echoed through the office before the door swung open. My father entered first. He wore a dark gray suit, his presence commanding, exuding the confidence of a general stepping into a battle he was certain he would win. Jason followed closely behind, that smug half-smile on his lips. The one I despised. He was wearing a brand-new suit, likely already prepared for his role as CEO. How laughable. My father strode straight to my desk, not bothering with any pleasantries. "Rose, I assume you understand the situation now." I lifted my gaze, meeting his cold, unwavering eyes. "I understand perfectly, father," I replied, my voice steady. He nodded, as if he had been expecting my compliance. "Good, then let's begin the transition. Jason will need your guidance for a few weeks before he officially takes over." I let out a soft chuckle. "Transition?" I raised an eyebrow. "You think this decision has already been made?" Jason crossed his arms, tilting his head at me like I was some desperate fool clinging to a lost cause. "Rose, don't make this difficult," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We both know who's going to run this company." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, unwavering. "Yes, we do," I said slowly, "but it's not you." The smirk on Jason's face faltered. "Rose, don't be childish," my father interjected, his voice firm with authority. "There's no need to drag this out." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I calmly reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying a document that carried all the power in the room. Sterling Enterprises shareholder agreement and governance terms. Jason's eyes narrowed, my father's brow furrowed. "What the hell is this?" Jason muttered. I stood up, slowly walking toward the screen. "This," I said, my voice controlled but razor-sharp, "is the legal document stating that any change in the CEO position must be approved by the controlling shareholder." I turned, locking eyes with my father. "And father, the person holding 60% of the shares right now, I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the truth sink in. Is me. For a moment the room fell into absolute silence. My father froze, Jason stared at me, then let out a dry laugh. But this time, there was no arrogance in it. This can't be right, he shook his head. Dad owns this company. He's the one in control. I smirked. Really? I picked up another document and placed it on the desk. Father sold me 15% more shares in 2017 when the company needed expansion capital. In 2019, during the major lawsuit, he leveraged another 10% to me. And he never took them back. I stepped closer to Jason, lowering my voice. But every word was laced with absolute power. You think you're taking over this company? I tilted my head slightly. You don't hold a single ounce of power. Jason's face went pale. Dad, this is a joke, right? He turned to my father, almost desperate. Tell her she can't do this. But my father said nothing. He understood. I saw the calculations in his eyes. He was scrambling to find a way to turn the situation around. But there was no way. I had already won the moment they tried to cast me aside. 9:15 a.m. Jason lost control. He slammed his hand on the desk. No, I won't let you steal this company. I didn't even blink. I'm not stealing anything, Jason, I said evenly. I'm simply keeping what was already mine. He turned to my father again, but this time, there was nothing he could do for him. I was the majority shareholder. I was the one in control of Sterling Enterprises. My father finally exhaled, his voice heavy with resignation. Rose? Do you really want to turn your family into your enemies? I met his gaze, unwavering. No, father, I said, my voice firm. You made me your enemy when you tried to take away what I built. The room was filled with their defeat. Jason clenched his fists, but he was powerless. My father sank into his chair as if the authority he once held had drained from him completely. I had won. But I knew. The real battle had only just begun. I had anticipated that my father and Jason wouldn't accept defeat easily. Less than 2 days after our confrontation at the office, the first signs of their counterattack emerged. I felt it in the shift of the company's atmosphere, the hesitant glances from executives, the whispers spreading like wildfire. They weren't giving up. They were fighting back. 10:00 a.m. I walked into the boardroom where all the board members were already seated. Some avoided my gaze. Others stared at me with hesitation. Just as I expected. My father and Jason had leveraged their old connections, pressuring the board. The longtime executives, those who had once been loyal to my father, were wavering. Rose? One board member spoke up. We need to discuss the company's stability. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Stability? I echoed, smirking. Yes, another chimed in. Many investors are concerned about the sudden leadership change. They fear that your father and brother stepping down from leadership could impact market confidence. I understood immediately. This was my father's play. He couldn't overthrow me through legal means. But he could sow fear. Make the board doubt me. Make them believe I couldn't maintain the confidence of shareholders in the market. I scanned the room, studying each person carefully. I saw hesitation, fear, and the invisible strings being pulled behind the scenes. They had been manipulated. But I had been prepared for this. I turned to the large screen behind me, where sharp financial data appeared in bold, undeniable numbers. I understand that you have concerns, I said, my voice slow but razor sharp. But let me remind you of a simple fact. I pointed at the numbers on the screen. Sterling Enterprises' revenue had increased by 350% over the past 5 years. Our long-term contracts with major corporations had grown by 72% since my father's tenure. Last year we achieved the highest net profit in the company's history. I looked each board member in the eye, my voice cutting like a blade. Every single one of these achievements happened under my leadership. Not my father's, not Jason's. Mine. Silence. And this? I swiped to another chart. displaying a different set of figures. Shows the period when my father and Jason were in charge. Financial gaps, bad debt, poor business decisions. A few board members visibly paled. Are you worried about me taking over? I arched an eyebrow. Or are you worried that my father and Jason are simply trying to reclaim the power they lost? The weight of silence filled the room. I had regained control. But I knew they weren't done fighting yet. That afternoon, the media picked up the story. An article appeared in Business Weekly, its bold headline sprawled across the page. Leadership crisis at Sterling Enterprises, is Rose Sterling too aggressive? I laughed, how predictable. I skimmed through the content. There were no direct accusations, but the entire article subtly painted me as power-hungry, implying that my father and Jason being removed from leadership was a reckless decision. I knew exactly who was behind this. My father was using the media to sabotage me. But if he thought I would sit back and do nothing, he was mistaken. I picked up my phone and called a journalist I had known for years. I have a story for you, I said, my voice steady. But you'll need to move fast. 1 hour later, I sent him a complete file. Evidence of my father's financial misconduct during his time running the company. Jason's failed investments that had cost the company millions. Contracts signed solely for personal gain. Benefiting the family, not the business. The article was published the very next day. Inside Sterling Enterprises. The financial secrets James Sterling didn't want you to know. The impact was immediate. Investors shifted their support to me. The board had no choice but to stand behind me. My father and Jason were backed into a corner. This time, they couldn't turn the tables. The day my father retired, the sky was strangely clear. I stood by my office window, looking down at the city stretching out beneath me. Sterling Enterprises still stood tall. But inside, the power had completely changed hands. My father was forced to leave. The board of directors, overwhelmed by the evidence and undeniable financial results I presented, had no choice but to persuade him to resign. Publicly, it was framed as a voluntary decision. But everyone knew the truth. I had removed him. Jason gave up as well. He tried to fight, clinging to the illusion of power that my father had promised him, but when every door slammed shut in his face, when he realized no one supported him anymore, he had no choice but to sell his shares and walk away from the company. A week later, I received an email from his lawyer. I want to sell all my shares, what's your offer? I smirked, glancing at the number he expected. I sent back an offer far lower than that. An hour later he accepted. He had no other choice. Jason disappeared from the business world after that. I heard he tried launching another startup, but no one wanted to invest in a failure. He was no longer my problem. The next step was the purge. Those loyal to my father and Jason had no place in this company. I called a full executive meeting, and within 2 weeks, I eliminated everyone who no longer belonged. Some protested, some begged for a second chance. I didn't waver. Sterling Enterprises needed a new machine. I hired visionaries, people who looked forward, not back. I rebuilt the board of directors with the sharpest minds in the industry. Within 6 months, the company ran smoother than ever before. When the next quarterly financial report was released, Sterling Enterprises surpassed $100 million in revenue. I stared at the number on my screen and allowed myself a small smile. This was just the beginning. 1 year after my father left the company, he asked to meet me. We had dinner at an upscale restaurant. No more power struggles. No more boardrooms. No more media scrutiny. Just 2 people. One man who had lost everything, and one woman who had taken back what was rightfully hers. My father looked so much older. The commanding presence he once carried, the one I had feared as a child, was gone. Now he was just an aging man, sitting across from me with a nearly empty glass of wine. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. I misjudged you. The words echoed in the quiet space. Once, I had longed my entire life to hear them. I had believed that if this day ever came, if my father finally acknowledged me, I would feel fulfilled. But now, sitting here, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I set down my glass, my expression calm. Yes, you did. No resentment, no triumph. Just a simple truth. He nodded slowly, as if accepting it. Do you regret it? I smirked, taking a sip of wine. We didn't say another word. I stepped out of the restaurant, onto the streets glowing with city lights. Looking up at the tallest building in the city, where Sterling Enterprises stood, I knew without a doubt. I had won. No one could take away what I had built. No one could ever see me as a temporary replacement again. I no longer had to prove myself to anyone. And that was my greatest victory. Rose Sterling's story is not just a battle for power in business. It reflects a harsh reality of life. Talent is not always recognized, especially when faced with family and societal bias. In many family businesses, the heir is not necessarily the most capable person, but the one chosen out of tradition. But Rose proved that power is not given, it is taken. True success comes from determination, strategy, and belief in one's own worth, even when facing opposition from those closest to you. What do you think about fairness in family and business? Do you believe Rose was right to fight for what she deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about family and life.